Miigwech, merci beaucoup, and thank you for joining us at our Lunchtime Health Sciences webinar today on Gestalt language, why we are not understanding our autistic children. The webinar is being hosted by Halle Demchuk, speech language pathologist, and I'm Jenda Baker, the Health Sciences Programs and Partnership Coordinator here at NOSM University. Before we get started, I will do some acknowledgements, land acknowledgements, and formally introduce our speaker. This is a reminder to please keep your microphone off for the duration of the webinar unless you are asked to speak or asking a question at the end of today's presentation. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted to our RS and NoDip web pages. All of our previous HS webinars are on our NOSM YouTube channel, and you can find those links to those recordings on our RS and NoDip websites under the resource section. You can view these archived webinars at any time and receive a certificate for your professional development records. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to put them in the chat. I will monitor it throughout the presentation, and Halle will do a question and answer period at the end of today's presentation. So in the spirit of truth and reconciliation, NOSM University respectfully acknowledges that our pan-northern campuses is on the homelands of the First Nation and Métis peoples. The university buildings we occupy in Greater Sudbury and Thunder Bay are located on the territory of the Anishinaabe Nation, specifically Atikameksheng and Wahnapitae First Nations and Fort Williams First Nations. Beyond a land acknowledgement, we understand that reconciliation is a practice. We gratefully acknowledge the elders and knowledge keepers who share their gifts and teachings with us so that we may better understand and honor their wisdom and that of all of the traditional keepers of this land. NOSM University will continue to practice reconciliation by listening, learning, and fostering a culture of mutual respect and trust. Our speaker today is Halle. Halle is a registered speech and language pathologist with the College of Audiologists and Speech Language Pathologists of Ontario, and is a member of the Speech Pathology and Audiology Canada. Halle is a proud Métis clinician born and raised in Northwestern Ontario. Halle works exclusively with autistic individuals in the area of augmentative and alternative communication and Gestalt language processing. Halle has worked closely with Marge Blanc, who developed and published the Natural Language Acquisition Framework when creating the chocolate analogy, Stages of MLA. Halle is employed full-time at the Kiiwetinoong Okanagan Board of Education, providing fly-in and virtual services to remote Indigenous communities, in addition to owning and operating Happy SLP therapy services. Merci beaucoup, miigwech, and thank you, Halle, for your time today. We truly appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us and very much look forward to your talk and the opportunity to ask questions. I'll pass things over to you.
Awesome, thank you so much. I'm just gonna share this. Okay, is that sharing for you guys? It is, okay, you can see it full screen? Awesome. Okay. So hi again, everyone. My name is Halle Demchuk, and I'm a speech language pathologist living in Thunder Bay. I actually changed, oops, hopefully that doesn't show up. I actually changed the name of my presentation because I realized it wasn't very strength-based, saying that we're not understanding our autistic children. And I really aim to come from a strength-based perspective. So I changed it to Gestalt language, how we can better understand our autistic children. Thank you, Jennifer, for going through the land acknowledgement. Before we begin, I would like to disclose that I own and operate Happy SLP therapy services, and one of my areas of focus is facilitating communication in Gestalt language processors. So the learning objectives for today will be to differentiate between analytic language processing and Gestalt language processing, to summarize stages 1 to 6 of the Natural Language Acquisition Framework, and to explore options for including Gestalts on speech-generating AAC devices, or alternative and augmentative communication devices. I'd like to make a note on language. Throughout this presentation, you'll hear me using language such as autistic individuals, autistic children, or just autism, as opposed to the person-first alternative of person with autism or living with autism, as it has been indicated by the autistic community, as a preference by the autistic community, because autism is a neurodiversity and an inherent part of a person's identity and does not need to be pathologized. I also want to touch on neurodiversity affirming therapy. Neurodiversity affirming therapy refers to understanding that neurodivergent individuals are not neurotypical, and our goal should not be centered around making them appear neurotypical. This means that therapy procedures, standardized tests, and other therapeutic expectations that were designed for neurotypical children are not necessarily appropriate for neurodivergent clients. In my practice, we're committed to connection over compliance. But what does this mean? I'll give you an example. I was recently in a school and a facilitator came in to tell me how my client has been aggressive at times, a behavior I hadn't seen, and discussed this in front of him. As soon as I could, I told her we could discuss this after the session, and I spent the rest of my session repairing my relationship with that child by reducing demands, talking to him that sometimes we do get frustrated, and just building that trust back. Because if we don't have that trust at the base of our therapy, we aren't going to get very far. Other ways we can use neurodiversity affirming therapies are by working more on intrinsic motivation as opposed to extrinsic motivation or rewards, using an individual's special interests to guide therapy instead of just reinforcing with them, encouraging the movement of bodies and stimming, and creating goals that focus on advocating for one's needs. So Jennifer already went through this, so I won't really touch on this too much today. So we're going to start with the research. Gestalt language processing is definitely a hot topic right now, and an area that seems to have just been explored over the past few years. So you might be surprised to see that this article by Barry Prezant, which refers to two ways of acquiring language, Gestalt and analytic, dates back to 1983. But there had to be more research prior to this to suggest this. So the first component of Gestalt language processing that was investigated was the use of immediate versus delayed echolalia. Immediate echolalia refers to the repetition of a phrase, sentence, or a script immediately after it was heard. For example, if I ask a child, "How are you?" and they repeat back with the same intonation, "How are you?" that would be immediate echolalia. Now, delayed echolalia refers to something that is repeated hours, days, or even weeks after it was originally heard. A real life example is a child I worked with says, "You okay?" anytime she falls. This would be her using delayed echolalia. Now, Prezant and Duchan in 1981 analyzed over 1,000 utterances of echolalic children and found that immediate echolalia was not meaningless, but served a variety of functions. That's seen on the left. Rydell and Prezant continued this research by analyzing almost 800 utterances of 3 children and found that delayed echolalia served 9 communicative functions, which are seen in the interactive column on the right, as well as 4 non-interactive or child-directed functions. Moreover, they found that 7 out of the 13 reasons that you see bolded did require comprehension of the situation to respond with their delayed echolalia. So going back to the example of the child who says, "How are you?" With immediate echolalia, they might be taking a turn in conversation when they're unsure of how to respond. And for the child who falls and says, with delayed echolalia, "You okay?" she might be providing me information or affirming that she is okay. So Anne M. Peters coined the term Gestalt language processing, or the terms Gestalt language processing and analytic language processing in 1977, when she set out to study extensively the utterances of a 7-month-old child as she acquired language to see how syntax forms. She was instead surprised when the child did not acquire language as she expected, but learned in chunks that she termed Gestalt language processing. She continued to research the differences in ways that children acquire language, and then wrote a book in 1983 titled The Units of Language Acquisition, in which she states the following: "I gradually discovered that, whether a Gestalt or an analytic approach was used, children must in general start out with whatever units they can acquire, whether large or small. Therefore, to understand early language acquisition, one must understand the language units that children are actually working with. There is no reason to assume that these are necessarily the same as the units of adult language. So we're hearing that there are two distinct ways of acquiring language, referred to as analytic and Gestalt processing, and that echolalia does serve communicative functions. Anne Weatherby in 1992 summarized this information from Prezant and Peters to compare the two language development styles. These are the main differences. So on the left, you'll see analytic processing, which is what most of us are familiar with. The basic units are single words. So as learning progresses, analytic language processors move on to 2 words, then phrases, and so on. Their intonation develops later. It comes with longer sentences, so they're known as word babies. The single words are what carry individual meaning, and it's most common and what we often see as typical language development. And this is also what most professionals are familiar with. Whereas Gestalt language processing, the basic units are chunks or phrases, and word production is a later stage. Intonation comes first, so they're known as intonation babies. The chunks are what carry individual meaning, and these can be vastly different between different children. And it's less talked about, but equally valid. It still can result in a fully formed language system, and we see it more often with our autistic children or autistic individuals. So the actual protocol or process in which Gestalt language processors move from these chunks of language to self-generated language was proposed by Marge Blanc in 2000. Marge had studied autistic Gestalt language processors in her clinic extensively over a course of 15 years, prior to releasing her textbook on natural language acquisition, The Journey from Echolalia to Self-Generated Language. This is the protocol that is used today when working with Gestalt language processors. So with this supporting research, of which some of it actually includes autistic children, why are we just hearing about this now? Well, for one, qualitative research, especially in the areas of linguistics and psychology, took a backseat after the 1980s. And as Marge articulated in the foreword of Anne Peters' re-released book in 2021, bottom line, the inclusion of children who sound echolalic in quantitative research is just too hard. But things are changing. And in December 2023, a peer-reviewed article on natural language acquisition was published through ASHA, and this is open access. Before we dive into the stages of natural language acquisition, we need to understand how Gestalt language processors view the world. Gestalt language processors are also Gestalt cognitive processors, meaning they process in chunks or a whole rather than in small pieces. Can you think of an autistic child who struggles when their routine is abruptly changed, or if one piece is missing from their playset? That's because they have a Gestalt process for that routine or that playset, and when we're missing a piece or something's out of order, it changes the whole thing. We also can't take things literally or at face value because Gestalts are not processed semantically, but as a whole, and are usually tied to memory or emotion. Let's take the example of the phrase happy birthday. If you say this to an analytic language processor, they probably have a semantic schema in their mind. It's something you say at a birthday party. For a Gestalt processor, let's say the child really doesn't like the dark, and the first time they heard happy birthday was at a birthday party when all the lights were turned out. Now, anytime they feel anxious when the lights are turned out, they might sing or say happy birthday, because that is the Gestalt that is associated with the feeling. For another Gestalt language processor, they might say happy birthday every time they're excited because that's the feeling that was associated with that Gestalt. And other Gestalt language processors may never pick up the Gestalt happy birthday. So the process of natural language acquisition is comprised of 6 stages, but today we're really going to focus on the first 4 because that's where we see the shift from echolalia to self-generated language. We're going to go into all of these stages in more depth, but the stages are delayed echolalia, mitigation, single word and 2-word combinations, and then original phrases and beginning grammar. So when I was presenting on Gestalt language processing last year, I really wanted to think of a way that I could show the stages or the movement through the stages in sort of a schematic way. And so that's how the chocolate analogy came around. And I was lucky that I was able to reach out and work with Marge Blanc, and she has helped me really fine tune it. And at that point last year, I had it up to the first 4 stages, but now we've gotten it to all 6 stages. So that's kind of how this came to be. So there's a way to explain or show how we're moving through the 6 stages. So in stage 1, or echolalia, the child scripts whole gestalts. These chocolate bars represent these whole gestalts. It's cleanup time. Let's find it. The child is using these independently. They've picked them up from somewhere. In stage 2, or mitigation, the child begins taking parts of gestalts and combining them into new ways to create more flexible language. So instead of it's cleanup time, it's snack time. It's outside time. Instead of let's find it, let's find mommy. Let's find doggy. Let's find ball. In stage 3, the child will be able to isolate single words that are referential and combine 2 single words. So again, these words actually don't have to come from the gestalts or the mitigated gestalts, but at this stage, this is kind of the starting point where many of our analytic language processors start at, is at the single word level. But it's stage 3 for our Gestalt language processors. So word order is not important at this stage, and there's no use of grammar. So the child is only using words that are nouns, prepositions or location words, and adjectives, so descriptive words. In stage 4, the child can combine single isolated words to form novel phrases and sentences, such as, I eat snack, mommy goed in car. And this stage is characterized by poor grammar because at this point, the child is now self-generating. So when they're scripting adult language, they're going to sound like an adult. They're going to have all the grammar will be perfect because they're using scripted language. So stage 4 is characterized by incorrect grammar. And during this stage, the child will acquire grammatical concepts in levels 1 to 3 of Laura Lee's developmental sentence scoring. So we'll talk more about that later, but essentially, developmental sentence scoring is just a progression of how grammar rules are acquired. And it has 8 levels to it. So in stage 4 of NLA, children will acquire grammar from levels 1 to 3. In stage 5, the child will acquire grammatical concepts in DSS levels 4 to 6. So more complex grammar is what we're getting here. And in stage 6, the child acquires grammatical concepts in DSS levels 7 to 8. So the rest of the grammar system, this results in a full grammar system characterized by multiple embedded clauses. So you can see the Gestalt language processor can still end with a full, complete grammar system. So now we're going to go into the first 4 stages in more detail. So stage 1 is delayed echolalia. So what is it? The child is using verbatim utterances, or stage 1 gestalts, to express how they feel, what is happening, etc. Our goal in this stage is to model more phrases that might be picked up as gestalts that are easily mitigable. That means later on they'll be able to be mixed and matched, to understand what the gestalts mean, and to acknowledge gestalts. And what can we do? We're going to choose easily mitigable gestalts to model during play. We're going to listen, acknowledge, and model, and focus on redundancy. So we really don't want to focus on, we say redundancy over repetition because we are not trying to get the child to, we're not making the child repeat us. We're just filling their environment with more phrases that they might attach meaning to and pick up as gestalts that'll be easier for us to understand than maybe some of the ones they would have heard from media or other sources. So this is just like an example interaction with the SLP modeling phrases of let's go, we did it, and do it again. One thing I will note is that in stage 1, we're going to be modeling, or we're going to be modeling from the child's perspective or a shared perspective, because the child is picking up our utterances verbatim. So if we say like, you did it, then if they did something, they'll probably say you did it, because that's the verbatim response. So you can kind of read through this transcript and just see that we're naturally modeling through play. We're not expecting, we're not forcing the child to say anything. We're just showing them opportunities or what could be phrases that could make sense for them to pick up. So I do have a little video. Maybe we'll just get Jennifer to give me a thumbs up if you can hear the sound, because I'm not sure, because I have, oops, my headphones in. So I'll try to play it.
So I'm going to demonstrate what it would look like to model stage 1 gestalts. Modeling stage 1 gestalt is actually an oversimplification, just because the gestalt is when the client or the child picks up something with meaning. So I'm actually just modeling phrases that might be picked up as gestalts. So what I'm doing is allowing, again, this is neurodiversity affirming therapy. I'm allowing the child to pick what we're doing. So usually there's toys everywhere, and I'm following the child's lead. So I'm going to be modeling functional phrases that might get picked up as gestalts that will be easier to mitigate later on and easier for people to understand. So let's say my child really wants to do this, the car ramp. So I'm going to model, open it up. Oh, open it up. Put it on. Ready, set, go. Do it again. Put it on. Ready, set, go. We might play with that for a while. And then if the child moves over to this, same thing. Oh, put it on. Ready, set, go. Oh, do it again. Help me. Ready, set, go. And then I might move over to this later on. Child will try to figure it out. You can see they need help. You can model, help me. It's spinning, you can't tell. And when it stops, oh, do it again. Ready, set, go. So basically using whatever the child's special interest or interest in general is. You can also use this special interest. The kids really like letters. Open it up. Open it up. Help me. We just really want to be filling the environment with potential stage 1 gestalts that the kids will be able to pick up, and then they'll be easier to mitigate in stage 2.
And just another point on that, I'm kind of using the same gestalt across different contexts, because sometimes our gestalt language processors really associate one script with one item. So if I can kind of show, you can ask, help me, or do it again in a number of, my intonation's the same, but the activities are different, we might be more likely to have the child start to pick up gestalts like that they can use in different contexts. So stage 2 is mitigation. So in this stage, the child uses mitigated or mixed and matched gestalts. These can be shortened gestalts. So if they have a really long script from a movie, it might be shortened to more concise, or adding a new phrase to the end of existing gestalts. This is what I see the most common, is there's a frame and the child kind of mixes and matches within it. What is our goal is to show that the child that language is flexible by modeling mitigated gestalts. It's the beginning step in a GLP, using language flexibly. And what can we do? We're going to model mitigations naturally when a child uses a gestalt. It's often easier to mitigate stage 1 gestalts that we have introduced versus gestalts that may have been picked up from one targeted instance, like a TV show, because those tend to carry a lot of emotion and meaning. So what I mean by that is, if we go back to our happy birthday song example, and the child has picked up happy birthday and sings it every time they are scared or of the dark, then it's going to be hard to mitigate that. Like happy, you can't really add to that. And also they're not feeling happy, so it doesn't really make sense. So it's often easier for us to kind of mitigate those gestalts that we might have introduced, that the child might have picked up, that have been kind of introduced to be mitigated later on. So again, if we're using our same examples from the last transcript, we're keeping the same model of we did it. The adult could say, we did it. We did our coloring today. We did a lot today. Or let's go eat. Let's get a spoon. Let's go to the fridge. Do it again. Do it more. Do it fast. Let's go again. It's actually mixing and matching two different gestalts that the child had. But again, it keeps the familiarity there and the meaning, but there's some flexibility and it adds some new meaning to the end or to parts of the gestalt. So I will demonstrate this one too.
So again, the things that are going to stick as stage 1 gestalts are going to differ for every child, but our goal in stage 1 is to provide more opportunities, more examples of gestalts that can be picked up, that can be understood by more people, that make a little bit more sense in context and can be mixed and matched and moved around later on. So once we see that our children have a number of different types of gestalts, maybe things like, I like it, I see it, help me, pick me up, do it again, stop it. Once we have a number of different frames and gestalts, we can start moving on to stage 2, which is a really fun stage. It's where we get to switch part of the gestalt or part of the phrase to become more flexible. And this is where children really begin to see that language is flexible and we can communicate things a little bit more concisely. So for an example, I think my therapy would look very similar. It's all child-led, play-based, following the child's lead. So my child might have the gestalt open the door or open it up, one of those. So it could make sense for me to model, open the purple, take it out, it's a robot, put it in, close the box. Let's see what's next. Open the green, take it out, it's a duck, put it in. What's next? Open the orange, take it out, it's a truck, put it in. So you can see there, I'm still using a number of stage 1 gestalts. I'm mitigating the open the blue, open the purple, open the orange, and it's a truck, it's a robot. There are those 2 frames that I'm mixing and matching, but I'm still mostly using declarative language. I'm not asking questions. Kids aren't ready for questions until stages 3 or 4. So I still am including stage 1 gestalts because those are still things that are going to be likely picked up, and just focusing on declarative language. So that could also look like using a book like this, and let's say, I see Chase. I see Ryder. I see a skipping rope. I see a tower. I see sky. I see a helicopter. So we're using that frame I see and just mitigating the ending parts.
Okay, so that's stage 2. Stage 3 is the light bulb moment when the child recognizes single words as units and begins to use referential language for single words or 2 single words, but no use of grammar here. So what is our goal? Our goal, before grammar can occur, a child needs to isolate single words and make 2-word combinations. We want to keep kids or allow kids to stay in the stage for as long as possible to avoid them reverting back to relying on gestalts. So the thing about stage 3 is the child's MLU, or mean length of utterance, is going to decrease drastically. So if we were not familiar with this framework, we could think that our child is regressing, they're not talking as much, but actually they're hitting a light bulb moment where they're no longer needing to work within these mitigated frames. They're now actually extracting and understanding that single words carry meaning. So we want to keep them in the stage and allow them to label and isolate single words and not expect or write goals that want them to increase their utterance length, because that's going to send them back to stage 1 and 2 and not help them move forward. So they're going to sound younger in this stage.
Halle, there is a question.
Yeah,
In
absolutely. I
the
can take
chat.
that.
Okay, it says, out of curiosity, how do you assess a child being analytic versus Gestalt language processors if they are not yet at stage 1? Gestalt and only making sounds, not yet forming clear words, minimal expressive language.
Yeah, that's tricky. I think if we know our child, let's say this child is autistic, if we can hear some intonation patterns, those are going to be probably good indicators that this child is likely a Gestalt language processor, and would benefit from this approach. The other thing about starting with this approach with stage 1 with an analytic or a Gestalt processor is it's not going to harm an analytic processor to be modeling Gestalts, because an analytic processor will likely just hear the salient single word and pick that up. But we could be doing more disservice to our Gestalt language processors by not identifying them, because sometimes drilling those single words for a Gestalt language processor can cause them to be stuck in what we call single word Gestalt, and it just makes it harder for them to create that flexible language later on. But I think for a case like that, depending on the age of the child, looking at introducing alternative and augmentative communication would probably be, might be appropriate for them. Is that okay? Is that a good answer? Or did that answer the question? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I can talk more about that later too. So stage 3, what we're going to do in stage 3 is continue using declarative language and concepts that we can refer to with our eyes or gesture to. So stage 3, again, we're not focusing on grammar at all. So we're labeling nouns, attributes, and location words. And yes, that's pretty much it. So I'll have a little demonstration here as well.
In this stage, we're likely going to notice that kids are processing more, they're talking less, and they are really isolating those individual words and processing a lot more information. So we want to be careful that we're not expecting them to use a longer utterance, because it might send them back to using Gestalts or mitigated Gestalts when they're really starting to see that there's individual words. So an activity I like to use for this is anything that, again, we can talk about different nouns, adjectives, and locations. So if we're doing this I spy, I can pull things out. Yellow bird. Oh, house. Roof. We're also not using a lot of intonation right now, because we're not needing things to stick that way. We're just kind of commenting on different attributes. Cat. Ears. Yellow cat. Oh, anchor. There. Rocket. Up. Train. There. So kind of focusing on things like that, not using a ton of intonation. I also really like these sorts of activities that have like a lot of things we can label or talk about the location. So I could always say like mom, trampoline, mom on swing, mom, garden, carrot, up, carrot, out. So I'm not using words like pull carrot, right? Because that's a verb. Oh, inside, kitchen, baby milk, oh, laundry, on,
I guess technically I shouldn't really use on, but that's one that we can kind of see. Sink, water, fridge, pizza, out, pop, down, popsicle, chair. So again, we're really just focusing on nouns, adjectives, and location words.
And that stage is going to feel really weird after stages 1 and 2, where we're using such long utterances or we're mitigating. But it's really important, a really important stage, and kids will start moving out of it typically on their own into stage 4. So just keeping them there as long as possible and just showing that we can be labeling and using lots of single words. So stage 4 is original phrases and beginning grammar. So most Gestalt language processors are not actually ready to answer WH questions until stage 4. So that's why up until stage 4, our therapy is going to mostly be focusing on declarative language. So just commenting on what's happening as opposed to asking questions. So in stage 4, the child begins to use original language with beginning grammar. This stage is marked by poor grammar because children are just beginning to use grammar rules. So even though they might be a lot older than our analytic processors who started basically at single words, they're going to now be making those same incorrect grammar rules that those other kids did so much earlier. So our goal is to model grammar in developmental progression. The child will likely sound younger. And what do we want to do? We want to model and teach language rules following the levels of developmental sentence scoring. Stage 4 looks the most, I would say, like traditional analytic. Stage 4 and above looks the most like traditional analytic language processing therapy, as we're focusing on different grammar rules. But the important thing here is that we're not drilling, because if we drill, these kids are likely going to pick those up as scripts. So if we drill WH questions, kids are going to pick the answers up as scripts. So we're modeling naturally. That's kind of the whole natural language acquisition, modeling naturally, the different grammar rules.
Halle,
yeah.
There was another question from Lauren, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
It says she's also curious about teaching Gestalt language processors using alternative communication devices, such as Proloco2Go or PECS. If you have time to discuss that as well.
Yeah, awesome. I will have a little bit on that at the end. So I can take more questions after I go through it.
Thank you.
So this is just like a different way that I wrote out the developmental sentence scoring. That is what I was talking about, the big kind of list of grammar rules for stage 4. So stage 4 again covers the DSS levels 1 to 3. I'll actually show you. Oh, we're going to skip that for a second. So this is actually what the DSS looks like. You can Google this and find it for free. And it's, again, basically just the list of how grammar, the developmental progression of how grammar is acquired. So in stage 4, we're focusing on like these levels 1 to 3 and so on and so forth. So I just wrote them out a different way. But I'll show you what we would do for targeting these in therapy.
I'm going to sound a bit like a broken record, but your therapy in stages 4 to 6 are going to look very similar to the last 3 stages, in that it's going to be targeting grammar goals naturalistically and in a child-led manner. If we try to drill, the grammar is going to just end up becoming scripted, or the answers to WH questions will just become scripted. And that's not what we want in these stages. So I have a resource that I use from Corinne's Moose at Crescendo Communication, which is essentially a checklist of each of the grammar goals that go along with each of the stages according to the DSS. So for example, I can plan in a session to target stage 4 grammar, and I would pick some of the grammar goals that I know my child maybe doesn't have yet, and I would just plan my session around that. So let's pretend that I'm working at DSS level 1. So that's again within stage 4. And I want to target some noun modifiers like this and that, personal pronouns like mine and yours, and present progressive verbing. So I can set up my activity, so I'm modeling those, and I can keep track of when the child is using it independently, if they do this session or if I'm just modeling this session. But I'm not drilling. So if we're doing this for an example. Okay, so if we're using this as an example, and we're doing an activity where we're going shopping, maybe my child has the cart and I have the basket, I'm just gonna model naturally. We are shopping. I want that one. It's mine. Your turn. You are shopping. What do you want? You want this one? Put it in your cart. I am baking cookies. I am getting flour. Where is that? This is it. I am putting it in my basket. And so on and so forth. So you're noticing I am using words like this and that. I'm using mine and yours. And I'm using the present progressive verb tense. So we are shopping. I am baking cookies. I am getting flour. I'm also starting to introduce some basic WH questions, like where is that? Because in stages 4 and above, that's when kids can really start answering those appropriately.
Okay, so I kind of already showed this, but that was stage 4. I was kind of focusing on DSS level 1 there, which you can scroll across and read what I was targeting. And then you would basically carry on your therapy stages, NLA stages 4 to 6 is just making sure the child has all of these by modeling in your activities. Again, not drilling. So just modeling, and eventually, like everything else, they will pick up the grammar rules. That's how they've come this far with the framework. It's all through modeling. Okay, so just kind of an overview. We can assist in moving kids through the NLA or natural language acquisition stages by naturally modeling the stage that they are in or working towards, not expecting or forcing a certain answer, because it might become stuck as a script and it will not help in creating flexible or self-generated language, focusing on declarative language first, and including gestalts on AAC devices. So we're going to talk about that a bit. So AAC systems are all the ones that really exist right now are set up for analytic language processors, which is a good thing because our goal is to move these kids through the NLA stages. So we don't want them to have to relearn a completely new motor plan when they get to stages 3 and up. But we also should add gestalts and adapt when it's important to what is important to the child. So here are some considerations for if and how we should add gestalts to AAC devices. So is the language meaningful and important to the user? Are the gestalts needed for self-advocacy or for safety? Saying, I'm finished, my name is whatever. Will the auditory output be synthesized speech, recorded speech, or original audio? Different systems allow for different types of audio output, and it's assessing to see what the child works best with and what they respond to. Do the gestalts interfere with the system setup and motor plan? If they do, we probably shouldn't add them. Is the language easily mitigable and versatile? And are there gestalts for a variety of communicative functions? So self-advocacy, repairing communication breakdowns, etc. So I'm going to actually stop sharing and then show you guys here. I'm going to do that right now. Wait. Here we go. Okay. So I'm going to show LAMP, which is a system is a AAC program that I use a lot in my practice. It is very much a word-based system. It's designed for analytic language processors, but we can adapt it So I'll show you guys here. The first thing, this is LAMP. We don't want to do anything to the first page. That's our first step. Is this is set up the way it is for a certain reason, and we don't want to adapt. We don't want to change anything on the first page, or really the existing motor plan of the program, because it will be useful to our kids in stages 3 and above. And we want them to have access to all the words, because we're presuming competence. We're presuming that they may be able to use all of these. So we don't want to change the system as it is. However, with LAMP or most systems, there are opportunities, there are places to add customization. So that's what we're going to focus on with our Gestalt language processors. So there's kind of two ways with LAMP specifically. You can add Gestalts, and this is the same for other augmentative programs. Some programs have like what's called a quick fires page, where they can say, kids can say, or individuals can say things that they need to get across quickly, like, hold on a second, I need a break, like those kind of things. So we can do that on LAMP. I've seen it done before, and I've used it at times under the Mine folder. Again, it doesn't really matter. The Mine folder, you can add Gestalts to this folder, and that could be kind of your quick fires for your kid. So I have ones like, help me,
Do it again.
do it again.
I like it. I don't like it.
If you're I like it, you should definitely be adding I don't like it. But then there's also options with LAMP specifically, some other programs as well, where you can record your own voice. So this might be a Gestalt a child has chases on the case when maybe they are going to find something, or they lost something and need to find it. They might say, Chase is on the case. So that's actually my recorded voice there. And then another thing you can do is actually record audio from different media sources, because some Gestalt language processors prefer at least in stage 1, prefer the verbatim, utterance. So that's what I did here for this one. Says, I like to move it, for a child maybe who says that when they need a break. So those are options, different ways you can add different types of media to your Gestalt. What I tend to prefer personally, which again, it depends on the child, but I've seen it work quite well with LAMP, is to, instead of making like a quick fires, I tend to pick the kind of folder or the core word that's most associated with the Gestalt. So for example, under go, I have ready, set, go.
Ready, set, go.
So that's a Gestalt. And then at some point when the child is at the point where they're breaking those Gestalts down, they're right by go. Go is right there. So that's not really they don't have to relearn a whole motor plan. They're already kind of going to the same place. Same with like turn it on. I have that by under like the TV section, the TV. Turn it on.
Turn it on.
Or help me is right beside help.
Help me.
So that's how I prefer to add Gestalts most of the time if it works with the child. I do have some who have like a quick fires page, but having it within the motor plan and near the core word that they're eventually hopefully going to use, I find works pretty well too. And going back to the question about PECs, I don't recommend PECs for Gestalt language processors. I don't recommend PECs for really augmentative communication in general, largely based on motor planning. So PECs are always moving around. They don't allow the child to actually build a consistent motor plan. And so that's one of the reasons I don't recommend PECs typically. And as well as our children need robust language systems, and that's something that certain augmentative communication systems provide. Not all of the ones out there are robust language systems that can lead to a full grammar system, but really that's what I would prefer to introduce to a child. I have 2-year-olds using LAMP, and that's going to grow with them instead of having to learn new motor plans through time. So I actually think I have a few more slides.
And Lauren just asked one other quick question. She said, would the teaching procedure be modeling the use of those Gestalt on their device as well as expressive?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are some AAC users who don't like, kind of depend. Yes, the most of the answer is yes. We're gonna, same with how we're modeling naturalistically when we're providing this therapy without the device. When we're teaching a device, we're also modeling. That's how our kids learn aided language simulation. Us modeling the use of the device, it's like learning a second language. We're not quizzing our kids on or asking them, tell me this, tell me that, because it just becomes work. We're modeling the use of the device. So often, yes, in activities, I would say, help me. I might say it verbally, and I would say it on the device. And I'd model it on the device. In an ideal world, I'd have my own device. The child would have their own device, because that way I'm not touching their voice, and I am modeling, showing them how to use it, but not touching their voice. Again, that's not always feasible, not always possible. But yeah, we are modeling that way. There are some situations where we have adult AAC or older AAC users who are not verbal, and sometimes providing mouth words at the same time can be overstimulating. If these kids aren't using any mouth words and they're fully non-speaking, then I'll sometimes just model on the iPad because I'm talking too much and it's overstimulating. But for the most part, with my kids who are maybe they're somewhat verbal and they're using AAC, I'd be modeling, yeah, naturally in conversation and then also on there. The other thing too is when I'm modeling on the device, I'm not just focusing on Gestalts. Like I'll also model, ready, set, go. I might just touch go. Or open the door. I might just press open. So I'm saying open the door and I'm modeling open on the device. It's still great input for those kids. We're just, again, giving multiple modalities. Hopefully that kind of answers that question. Okay, and then I think I'm almost done. Okay, key takeaways. Echolalia is meaningful and children are communicating with it. Gestalt language processing is another natural way of processing language and is supported by evidence. And the natural language acquisition framework is the process by which Gestalt language processors move from delayed echolalia to self-generated language. I've listed a few courses or just other resources there. And then my references, and I think that's it for the presentation.
Thank you so much, Halle. That was so wonderful. We'll just open it up for questions, so feel free to take yourself off of mute, turn on those cameras. It's always nice to see some faces. Yeah, or put it in the chat if you're more comfortable.
And I'll also just throw this out there too, because I didn't get to say this, or I didn't say it. Some kids won't get through all the stages, and that's fine too. Like it's not, some kids have different journeys, right? And we just want to best support our kids to see, even getting a child who's using stage 1 Gestalts into stage 2 and being able to mitigate and just get a lot more across to us, that can be huge too, right? So our kids might not get all the way up to stage 6, it is possible, but some might be stage 1, 2, or 3, and that's also great. We're allowing them to see that language is flexible and to use it more flexibly. Someone asked about the slides. I can, yes, I can send those to Jennifer, and then maybe she can pass them on.
Absolutely, thank you. Any other questions? Lots of thanks to you, Halle, from Lauren, for answering all of her questions.
Okay.
Any other questions? Well, Halle, on behalf of NOSM University and us, the Health Sciences Unit, thank you so much for taking the time to present to us today. What a great presentation. We're just wishing everyone a wonderful afternoon, and we will see you all in April for our next webinar.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.